So, I know it's Father's Day, but I'm not doing a Father's Day sermon. I'm not doing a Father's Day sermon because something else earlier this week really became more important. And that was hope. All the calls I was getting were about people who had lost it, who couldn't find it. Because I had so many people at the beginning of this week sitting in hopelessness and calling me because people had actually taken their lives, and looking at a statistic that actually is, this past year, the spike in suicides in our country. It is a time of deep concern. And that is why I do what I do. It's why most of these types of places exist. We exist in order to foster and feed hope. But what on earth does that mean? I mean, that was why this particular faith grew so hugely, astronomically at the turn from the 1800s to the 1900s. Because it was a place where you walked through that door and you were not condemned. No one was telling you you were going to burn in hell forever. We were all saying you created hell on earth. And now it appears that we've woken up to the idea and the truth that we have created hell on earth. So what on earth are we supposed to do? As a child, I hated the word hope. I hated it. I've had a love-hate relationship with hope over the years. It has swung wildly from teen angst. You know, I was wearing fishnets and cowboy boots. My hair alternated between black and hot pink. And I denied hope. Even though I'm sort of, at my core, basically a hopeful person, I got older and I started to derail it as useless. I mean, a dangerous construct. How many of you here have ever thought of hope as being evil? I like that. I did. I walked around knowing that hope was evil. I worked with terminally ill kids. I had been one of them, obviously not terminal. And if one more person said, I hope they will get better soon, I know they will get back to just the way it was. And so I sort of was looking at hope, and is hope an emotion that placates and robs our ability to see the precious present? Does it rob us of this reality, of this moment? And I used to think so. I used to tend to agree with Nietzsche, who declared it, quote, the worst of evils, the worst of evils, for it prolongs the torment of man. Well, today I'd say he sounds like he woke up on the traditional ancient Greek power structures, because maybe they're not torments. But back in the day, I was running around town in a black sealskin coat that I had ripped the seams out of and poured red acrylic paint so it looked like it was bleeding, as some kind of protest not to kill baby seals. The coat, by the way, was from my great-great-aunt from her honeymoon in Niagara in 1910, which perhaps didn't honor those seals at all. Likewise, too, I thought hope is a fantasy story, the story of how we want things to be. I was a big fan of Dorothy Day and the Catholic Workers. I've got one head nodding here. I believed her words. I had them on my bulletin board. People say, what's the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has the right to sit down and feel hopeless. There is too much work to do. And while I agree with most of that sentence, and I'd rather live by one step at a time in thoughts and deeds, I've now lived long enough to understand that the feeling hopeless, it's not a right, it's not even a choice. Often it's a curse. And it's very difficult for many of us, and impossible for some of us, to climb out of it without help. So, I recognize that my younger self's condemnation of what that was, I now call false hope. False hope is always retroactive, regressive, and based in illusion. It's the fantasy picture of slogans like, "Make America Great Again." It's the words of well-wishers to those whose bodies is devastated, physically and emotionally injured, who say, "Don't give up hope. Things will get back to normal soon." Normal is code for back to where it was so horrific I couldn't look at it and can't hold that pain in my mind. It's the heart of some of the most devastating policies that we have towards children in our country. Whether they've been forcibly removed from desperate refugees, as we're seeing now, stomach-turning events, unholy at their core. The way we treat homeless children, wards of the state. We are urged to get them into normalizing situations as soon as possible, i.e. get them into schools, get them into shelters, put them in a tent where we cannot see them, where we can see pictures that we can interpret as humane and not feel guilt or guilty about complicity in their trauma. And when the world seems very bleak, we become too scared to remember how to hope. And I've been there. And so I suspect have many of you. And yet it is by embracing hopelessness that we can find the antidote to our fear of hope. Because what we fear is the wounds from false hope. We have been taught, however unintentionally, that to hope or to be hopeful is to embrace powerlessness, is to embrace our lack of agency, is to give up. There's nothing left but hope. This is not true. This is a myth that is so pervasive among the realists, the so-called realists of the world, whether they want to sit on the right or they want to sit on the left, whether they want to say that they're God-fearing or they want to say that they're atheists. It is a myth. Nothing could be further from the truth. Science, over and over again, the fields of medicine, the fields of psychology, the fields of engineering, the stories of survivors, the study of war and its aftermath, and countless, countless survivors in every kind of trauma you can think of, those who have landed on the moon. True hope, in every single instance, was a critical component of success. There's data, there's charts. Click, 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 click. Richard Rohr teaches us that embracing our brokenness creates our need for mercy. I would expand that into hope as well. We must open ourselves up to embrace our feelings of hopelessness if we are to find hope and be the light of hope for others. In the poem, These Branching Moments, Rumi writes of this kind of hope for me so beautifully as he speaks of a bird who has found freedom. It's the Coleman Barks translation. How did you get away? You were the pet falcon of an old woman. Did you hear the falcon drum? You were a drunken songbird put in with owls. Did you smell the odor of the garden? You got tired of sour fermenting and left the tavern. You went like an arrow to the target from the bow of time and place. The man who stays at the cemetery pointed the way, but you didn't go. You became light and gave up wanting to be famous. You don't worry about where you're going to eat, so why buy an engraved belt? I've heard of living at the center, but what about leaving the center of the center? Flying towards thankfulness, you become the rare bird with one wing made of fear and one of hope. In autumn, a rose crawling along the ground in a cold wind. Rain runs the roof down, out by the spout as fast as it can. Talking is pain. Lie down and rest. Now you've found a friend to be with. Climbing into that space with a friend who has no hope may feel a little contagious at times. But in the words of that poem, I found true hope. When I was a young woman watching my second father also die, my mother yet again to be a young widow again, we would visit. And when he could no longer speak, I felt helpless and hopeless. I was losing another father. How cruel. Father's Day was no holiday for me until 1994, when a father gave me a son. But at that moment, I leaned over, hoping to hear his voice again. My daddy reached up as he lay dying and simply held one of my braids that had dangled over the edge of the hospital bed rail. And in that moment, neither of us were alone. And in that moment, a new definition of hope was kindled in my heart, one that had nothing to do with what we might think of as survival, and yet had everything to do with survival of the spirit. That spirit of that transmission of love. Now there's a whole field of research about the medical fields, cancer being the most studied, that chart the physiological benefits of hope and quote-unquote optimistic regards, as they like to say. But the evidence is clear. Those who are realistic optimists, those who have had hope as part of their being, they live longer. But what of that moment with my dad? That too was survival, not of the body. That was not going to come back. He had stage 4 brain cancer, lung cancer, and pageants. There's too much of him that had already been surgically removed. There's an old saying, you can't unpickle a pickle. It can never be a cucumber again. It's true. But as he held my braid, I knew I was loved. And he knew he was loved. And in that moment, and yes, I in pain, and him in pain, I was no longer feeling like life was hopeless. As Proverbs 13:12 so eloquently states, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. And we all long to feel loved. So perhaps I wasn't feeling like life was hopeless. And maybe in that moment, he wasn't feeling like death was hopeless either. I know that we all felt loved. And it was healing. So if hope is so essential to the core of our survival, what exactly is it? And here's where it gets really tricky. Researchers, scientists, behaviorists, theologians, philosophers, they all have like slightly different takes. They kind of quibble a little bit. They want to own the turf of their definition. Like, my definition is the right definition. But they kind of appear to have two very distinct avenues. And there's actually makes sense because we have right and left brains. So we have two distinct avenues and they're both part of one whole. Hopeful thinking necessitates the perceived capacity to envision workable maths and perceive goal-directed energy. Thus, hope is based on, quote, a motivational, positive state that is based on an interactively derived sense of success, agency, goal direction, and pathways, planning to meet goals. And it's an emotion. Anybody follow that? Not some, a little, a corner of it, grab hold of it. I'm going to read some more. Dr. Scaloli and Dr. Biller, who are leading hope researchers and experts in the field, I like their work a lot, hope studies, write, quote, hope is, in short, an essential element of our spiritual lifeblood. Now mind you, these are scientists and psychologists and neuroscientists, and this is their language. An essential element of our spiritual lifeblood. And it is the best medicine for overcoming feelings of helplessness, alienation, and fear. Individuals who are hopeful read more than a mental strategy for grasping at goals, solving problems, or managing crises. They achieve a different way of being in the world. End quote. What these researchers and several others are positing is an integrative approach to hope through exploration of its subsystems. They call them mastery, I might call it self-efficacy, attachment, and survival, to form the network that supports us in, this is the language I'm going to quote, greater perceived probability of power and presence, as well as protection and liberation. I rather like that idea. I'll read it again. Greater perceived probability of power and presence, as well as protection and liberation. I'm going to say it even shorter. For me, hope is an emotion and a way of being. Hope is an emotion and a way of being. It is both innate and it is learned. And it requires practice for efficacy. We can't just say, I want to be hopeful, and be hopeful. That is what leads down the avenue to false hope, to that idea of, I'm going to put this rose into wax so it will never ever die. Except, of course, it's now a wax rose, which is a lovely thing, perhaps, until the rose inside the wax will eventually rot, and it will eventually die, because we cannot hold on to a moment. We can flow with a moment and through a moment. We can't hold on to hope any more than you can hold on to a handful of jello. But how do we practice being hopeful? I mean, it's an emotion. How do you practice an emotion? But wait, it's a way of being. I can practice a way of being. First and foremost, true hope is not denial. We must practice mindfulness in all things, seeing flowers and weeds, seeing love and fear, listening to the reality and looking at the reality in the context of possibilities. We're very good at looking where people show, but we're not looking at everything. I might be pointing to that flame, and I said flame, so you looked at the flame, but the flame is a symbol for the light. And if we just look at the flame, we don't see the light. We don't see the possibility that this symbol is reflected in all of those symbols and in every single eye and heart here. We don't know how to get expansive if we're not practicing mindfulness in this moment. And we have to practice radical honesty about our desires, not the roads to them. Sometimes we get hung up on that. But we have to be honest about what we want, to envision a world free of slavery, inequity, environmental destruction, cancer, poverty. Insert your pet evil here. And I mean your pet evil. That's why there's so many of us. The work is too great for us all to have the same pet evil. There's too much. Too many claim men swallowed too much of it. What's your pet evil? What sparks you? We have to be willing not only to see that evil exists, but in the ways that you and I support it. And ew, I don't want to look there. But we have to be looking at it. Because I can't clean anything that's dirty that I can't see is dirty. Oh no, that dish is fine. My dog licked it clean. Maybe. That's all it is. I have to be looking at all the ways we can be free. Not just the ways that fit in with my past, my culture, or that I'm comfortable in. What does it mean that we have to look at all the paths? I mean, we have to acknowledge their existence. We don't have to support all the paths, but we have to acknowledge their existence. I believe in deep nonviolence. I believe in it in my core. But I have to acknowledge the roads of violent action. In the book of Job 5:16, the poor have hope. Injustice shuts its mouth. How can I be the hands of God? How can we be the hands of hope if we fail to look and see injustice, if we fail to see how we have been part of it? How did you get here today? It's a random question. How many of you got here today in a car? Like, how many of you got here in a motorcycle? So how many of you took wheels to get here? How many of you walked? We have one walker. We have two walkers. How many other walked? I'm willing to say actually all of you walked because I watched you walk through the door. So yes, all of you. Sometimes people wheel in. That's true. But not actually today. Some people have assistance of wheels and then transfer. Maybe some of you came by boat. How many of you took exactly the same road to get here? Nobody was in the caravan? Like your car wasn't behind her car, wasn't behind her car? No. No. So you didn't take exactly the same road. Even if you were on the same road, how many of you were on the same road in the same space at the same time? Well, I know that these two were because they were in the same car. But in general, no. In general, no. So what I want to say is that all of you are here. All of you got here by many, many pathways. And that, my friends, is a metaphor for hope. But it took you a moment to realize that you actually had walked here, because you had driven here. It took you a moment to realize that, ooh, which road did you take? Was there another road you could have taken? One of the keystones of hope is the ability to see many ways towards a goal. It's to have many definitions of a goal. Those two elements, many ways towards a goal, many definitions of a goal. It is more than being flexible, more than being expansive, more than being adaptable. It is all of that and more. And it takes practice. And so I'm going to give you the practice. I'm going to give it to you in spiritual terms. There's also psychological terms, and there's also some engineering ones. But this is true. So these are my holy three. Every day, a mindfulness meditation. Try 5 minutes. 5 minutes of mindfulness. Okay, 1 minute. 1 minute, work up to 5. Really, you can do this. We can do this. We don't have time to do this today, but we can do this. Mindfulness meditation. 2, a loving kindness meditation. Starting with yourself, expanding to a friend, expanding to the world, targeting an enemy. A loving kindness meditation. It takes under 2 minutes. You could do it multiple times. And 3, a gratitude meditation. Every single day. You might even do it more than once. I am so grateful to be standing here. I am so grateful that the tech is working and you can hear me. I am so grateful it's not raining outside, and I am grateful for rain. Those sentences have adjusted the chemistry in my brain and my gut. May I be free from suffering. May you be free from suffering. May all beings be free from suffering. Has changed the chemistry in my brain and my body. And I'm standing here right now. My toes are a little chilly. My hands are in front of me. I'm looking about. I was holding my breath for a moment. And I can hear the air conditioning. I am mindful. Those 3 elements, that took a couple of minutes, multiple times a day, till the soil of hope. And then the seeds you plant are a wonder. Ask questions. I wonder. I ponder. How do you pronounce that word? You research. Exercise your sacred activism toward yourself. Radical love to yourself. Radical love to the world. Exercise it every day. I know we're running a little long, but this is so important for you to carry out those tools. Those 3 meditative tools and a sense of wonder. I can't leave without quoting my favorite scripture, Shakespeare. In Richard III, Shakespeare penned one of the most popular quotes about hope. True hope is swift and flies with swallows' wings. True hope is swift and flies with swallows' wings. So much depth in that one sentence was not hatched alone. Richmond says it. Richmond says it in response to Blunt. These are all characters. You'll have to look them up. You'll have to do a little research. Might be worth reading Richard III again now, these days. Richard says it to Blunt. Blunt said, he, meaning Richard, he hath no friends but who are friends for fear, which in his dearest need will fly from him. Which in response to Herbert's, I doubt not but his friends will turn to us. Which then is in response to highlighting something Oxford had just said. Every man's conscience is 1,000 men to fight against this guilty homicide. Hope builds. See, hope builds. It starts with every man's conscience is 1,000 men to fight against this homicide. I doubt not, but his friends will turn to us. He has no friends when we're friends for fear. His dearest will need fly from him. True hope is swift and flies on swallow's wings. It multiplies by internal events, personal experiences, and external references and community. Shakespeare gives us with the beautiful imagery of a swift, meaning fast, and swifts, birds who rarely fly in a straight line and are able to sleep on the wing, and swallows who fly with lapping grace and do not lie on the ground. The double meanings of true hope are amplified by swifts and swallows. True hope is an immediate feeling containing beauty, grace, and multi-directional beacons of hope toward a real and truth-fulfilled goal. True hope is an immediate feeling containing grace and beauty, and it is multi-directional. It's a beacon toward a real and truth-filled goal. True hope, above all else, provides us with life-saving, love-affirming possibilities, expansive possibilities. Go forth in wonder and believe. Till your ground. Cultivate your hope. When you feel hopeless, wonder, ponder, ask questions, look for other maps, find friends. Go forth in wonder and believe. Go forth in hope. The world needs you. I need you. And you need each other.